Whenever a community springs up around a shared hobby or interest, humor is sure to follow. This holds especially true on the internet, where memes are as widespread and innumerable as the fandoms they spring from, ranging from funny videos to visual gags or images to stuff that only really makes sense if you're familiar with how it came about. You can't take 2 steps, or browse 2 pages, online without running into something attempting to be amusing. And the Smash Brothers community is no stranger to this. I mean, of course, why wouldn't a fandom comprised of a bunch of intersecting Nintendo fandoms have its own memes? We've seen the typical stuff, jokes about character interactions that must happen behind the scenes, or quotes from Sakurai or other major figures taken comically out of context. There are even jokes specific to competitive players, like poking fun at overused moves, dunking on low-tier characters, or griping about top-tier characters. And, of course, newcomer speculation. Every new Smash game brings a new set of memes surrounding the characters conversation settles around, branching off based on hopefuls who did or didn't make it in, fighters who came out of seemingly nowhere, or those who just didn't have their luck break the right way. But what happens when the memes about a character become so prevalent that it's all people know about them? When this meeting of the fans leads to them getting a skewed impression of who a character is and why their original fanbase liked them in the first place? It gets hard to tell who's there to support someone they like and who's just there for the memes. This is Challenger Approaching, where we take a character who isn't playable in Smash yet and go deep into detail on what they could be like if they got in for real. Our challenger this time is someone who, at this point, is known as much for his continued failure to get that failed invitation than everything else about him. But just what could he be like if he did get a chance? Let's take a closer look at the man behind the memes. Waluigi! Waluigi has a reputation that, at this point, precedes itself. A mainstay in Mario spin-offs for the past 20 years, his origins date back to Mario Tennis on the Nintendo 64. Wario needed a teammate for doubles tournaments, so Miyamoto and crew went to the drawing board. And since Wario was basically an evil version of Mario with his body proportions exaggerated, they said, hey, what if we also did that for Luigi? The result was a tall, spindly figure with a nasally voice and an affinity for purple, black, and upside-down L's. And the rest is history. Waluigi has an almost perfect attendance record in every Mario sports, kart, and party game since, and only the spin-offs, since he's yet to appear in a mainline Mario title or even a Wario title. But that's a whole other story. Beyond that, we don't actually know much about the lean, mean, not green, not machine with the Greek gamma on his hat. He's never had any official written backstory. Even his relation to Wario hasn't been consistent. Official sources can't seem to decide whether the two of them are supposed to be brothers, cousins, or just 2 guys who became friends over their shared enmity of the Mario Brothers. But despite a background shrouded in mystery, there is more about Waluigi's personality and motivations beyond just being Luigi's arch-rival and a source of comic relief. He harbors a deep envy of other people's success, especially that of Mario and Luigi, utterly convinced that the only way anyone ever gets anywhere in life is by gaming the system and cheating their way to the top. And he figures if they're doing it, he might as well too. But his own schemes rarely, if ever, work out, exposing his short fuse and tendency to make a scene when things don't go his way. Mix in a dash of self-pity deep beneath it all, and you get a character who's fun to hate and hilarious to watch, who also evokes the tiniest bit of sympathy when his plans for fame and fortune fail yet again. But that's not what the Smash community knows him for. Around here, he's more famous for something else. Being an assist trophy summon in every game since assist trophies became a thing, never getting the chance to be a full-fledged newcomer despite his fanbase's best attempts. He always seems to fall short of the roster and ends up playing support instead. Always the groomsman, never the groom, so to speak. And because the Smash community loves itself a good meme almost as much as it loves dunking on deconfirmed characters, Waluigi ends up the butt of a lot of jokes. Especially since there's still this recurring idea that anyone made an assist trophy must have been deemed undeserving of being playable, despite Sakurai himself explaining that's not how it happens because the playable rosters are locked in before the summons are. But that's another story. Though it's not all bad for the guy, because all the jokes at his expense have led to others in response that paint him in a more sympathetic light. Yeah, Smash memes are complicated. And all of this makes Waluigi's actual chances difficult to truly assess. While he's a recurring character in his series with a 2-decade track record, he's only ever been in spin-off games, which tend to only get minor attention in Smash via music, trophies/spirits, or sometimes a stage. And while he has a sizable support base, we're at a point where it's hard to tell who's there because they truly think he'd be a good newcomer and who's just there for the lulz. And it filters into a lot of moveset concepts. Sure, he's a comedic character by design, but there's more to Waluigi than just being a walking meme, and I've yet to see a concept that truly gets him. So I want to take a crack at this myself and see if I can build something that does Waluigi justice as a character beyond the surface level, the way Sakurai's own movesets almost always do. Because even if it turns out assist trophies have no chance for the rest of Ultimate's DLC, there will be another Smash game eventually, and each new entry is another opportunity to steal an invite for himself. So let's humor him a little. Let's say this wannabe mastermind does get confirmed eventually. What would Waluigi be like in Smash? For his default appearance, what you see is what you get. He's had his signature purple and black getup from the very beginning, and who am I to change what he'd insist was perfection? His current assist trophy is actually a pretty good point of reference, with the details on his hat, shirt, and overalls done in the same art style as Mario, Luigi, and Wario's overalls alt to best fit Ultimate's art style, or the style of a theoretical future entry. Worth mentioning that, unlike his assist trophy form, he would not hold his tennis racket here by default. When he starts moving around, we might have some room for Waluigi's animations to take some creative liberties, because we saw something similar with Wario, who got unusually jerky and stilted animations that fit his offbeat moveset and may or may not be a reference to his Game Boy origins. If they stretch things a little with Waluigi, I could see it being done in the opposite direction, with unusually fluid and complex movements that feel like something out of an old rubber hose cartoon, or Cuphead if you've played that. Same idea. Waluigi's always been a cartoony character, so it would fit, in moderation at least. Taking it too far would stray into Uncanny Valley territory. So what about his alternate colors? Where better to start with those than by, borrowing a few from Mario and Luigi? He already envies them to an unhealthy extent, so of course he'd steal their fashion sense. Maybe an individual color or two could get altered just a little to hide the theft. But Waluigi does have a couple of full-blown costume swaps he could use, like his tennis outfit from Mario Tennis Aces, or that amusingly strange bus driver getup he got in Mario Kart Tour's first London Cup. Maybe even an original biker outfit to match Wario's? I don't know how far the Smash team would want to go with costumes, but the options are there. Now that we know how Waluigi would look in action, let's see how he'd fight and what his actual attributes could be like. Waluigi's whole mantra with basically everything he does is finding ways to game the system and sabotage anyone in the way of his path toward greatness. Since he believes so strongly that you have to cheat in order to succeed, why not build his fighting style around that? While not the greatest in straight fights, his moveset would have ways of setting up big combos or knockouts on his opponents. Playing him right would leave you feeling like an evil mastermind, or a wannabe evil mastermind. But he'd have more going on than just traps and such. Several of Waluigi's tools would also have a side effect of giving him notably good stage control. He'd be very effective at locking down sections of the playing space, throwing a wrench in opponents' game plans by limiting where they can go without putting themselves at risk. It's subversive, which is very fitting. Digging into his raw numbers, well, Waluigi is very tall, so that makes him a bigger than usual target. Though his arms and legs are so long and spindly that he also has pretty good reach on his attacks, so there's a silver lining. Being so thin also puts him on the lighter side, but not as light as you might have expected. Most Mario spin-offs actually put him in medium weight classes, and I wanted him to have decent survivability for balance purposes, so I stuck him in a welterweight class of sorts in between mid and light, compared to the other characters you see here. He's the lightest of the plumbers, but still able to take a few hits. I took Waluigi's mobility in some appropriately weird directions. Long legs give him a decently fast walk and a great initial dash, but once he breaks into a full run, his awkward frame holds him back and makes his run speed pretty mediocre. And he'd be no less weird in the air. A very good first jump with his springy legs leads into a merely average double jump, and his lateral mobility in the air is a tick below average. Hey, at least it's not outright awful like Luigi's. His fall speed is on the floaty side, which helps him recover but also makes him easier to juggle. As previously mentioned, his attacks in general have great range and above average speed and combo ability, but his damage per hit ain't much to write home about. Because of this, Waluigi wants to avoid trading blows with opponents and getting into footsies exchanges, since he'll usually lose those trades, especially against characters with swords. Instead, he wants to sneak his hits in between opposing attacks, or find openings through other means. He needs to make the most out of any conversions he gets, which would actually be easier than it sounds, because he does have quite a few ways to get them going. More on that shortly. This also ties into his ability to close out enemy stocks. His main kill moves either require reads or take a while to actually start netting knockouts, but he does have the means to set them up more reliably if he plays the right way. You'll see. Okay, enough messing around. Let's go over Waluigi's moveset and exactly how it lets him do what he does best. Starting with the basics. Waluigi's jab combo consists of a punch using his near hand, then a follow-up with his far hand, then a finisher where he shoves his opponent forward with both hands at once. Despite the weird finish, it just does typical jab stuff, though the first part hits on frame 3, and combined with the range of Waluigi's arms, it makes for a nice disruptor. His forward tilt has him kick straight ahead instead. Think something a little like Ganondorf's, but with Waluigi pulling his foot back afterward instead of letting it stick straight out. A competent move for spacing when you're not that close up. It becomes increasingly more useful at higher percents since its knockback is straight ahead, and that doesn't change at all if opponents have higher damage on them, though it takes long enough to actually KO that it's more for putting people off stage than anything. Waluigi's up tilt is a simple-ish uppercut. Unlike Mario, he doesn't spin in place during it, just awkwardly swinging his fist up over his head. Due to his height, Waluigi's take on the move reaches higher but isn't as good at scooping people standing next to him. Nonetheless, it's a good anti-air that easily combos into stuff at low percents, though it stops being as useful at higher damage. For his down tilt, Waluigi does an awkward maneuver where he juts his foot out at ground level, then kicks upward, finishing with his leg at about a 30-degree angle. Dealing 2 hits for more total damage than you'd expect, it's most effective against damaged shields since the first hit can wear them down enough for the second hit to shield poke, though it has subpar startup to compensate, shown in the animation by Waluigi leaning back on his arm before the kick so he can keep from falling over. Then his dash attack is a surprisingly athletic slide tackle. Straight from the Super Mario Strikers games, it's a long-lasting burst option that can trap landings, sneak under overhead attacks, and trip up opponents in general just like in its game of origin. Though it's also not strong enough to kill at any relevant percent, purely for gaining or maintaining the advantage this one. And that's the first of many Mario Sports references, because here come a couple more. Waluigi's forward smash has him take out a driver from who knows where and swing away. While similar in concept to Peach's forward smash, Waluigi's swing has a more exaggerated motion, giving it more range and slightly more power, but also more startup. And unusually for a forward smash, its knockback is more vertical than horizontal, about a 60-degree angle. From one sport to the next, Waluigi's up smash has him whip out a tennis racket and perform a leaping overhead swing. Yeah, about time he used it. Similar to its golf counterpart, this move has some punch to it, but also notable startup, though it's a little faster and has less power and disjoint. It's also got a weird knockback angle, sending more forward than up. Then Waluigi's down smash is a show of poor sportsmanship, throwing a short-lasting tantrum on the spot, stomping on the ground with alternating feet for 4 hits total. Quite fast to come out and very active, it's great for tech chases and general option coverage, though the hits don't link into each other and only the first deals full damage, making it more of a utility move than a go-to finisher. Now let's ditch the gear and take to the sky for Waluigi's aerials. His neutral air has him spin sideways and kick outward with both legs at once. Super Smash Flash 2 had a similar idea, even though I disagree with other stuff they did for his moveset. It's got great reach by neutral air standards and even lasts a while, but it actually has notably slow startup for a non-sword neutral air, not coming out until about frame 10. While it won't let you break out of strings, it's good for covering options in the air, edge guarding, or using the initial hit to finish a string of your own. Waluigi's forward air is a one-handed karate chop. Hey wait, doesn't Luigi do this? This take on it that is most definitely not stolen has a rougher animation to show Waluigi isn't as accustomed to doing it, though he does put more force behind the chop and has more reach since his arms are longer. While Luigi's version is a combo move, this one has too much knockback for that, but instead it has enough knockback growth to kill at medium-high percents and be an effective edge guarding tool. Waluigi came up with something more original for his back air. Slyly looking over his shoulder, he swings his elbow backward in a rising arc as if trying to get the drop on someone sneaking up on him. It's fast to come out, with an awkward hitbox and equally awkward diagonal knockback without much growth, which actually makes it a very effective combo move. Not often you see back airs do that. Alright, deep cut time. Waluigi's up air calls back to one of his power shots from Mario Power Tennis by having him basically perform a breaststroke motion straight upward in midair. With great vertical reach as he sticks his arms out and circles them back to his sides, it's great for keeping opponents airborne, though it takes a while to actually start netting knockouts. Waluigi hops a little in midair during it, like a less extreme, less laggy version of K-Rool's up air, so you can use it as a brief emergency stall. And for his final trick, Waluigi's down air has him scrunch up in midair, then dive straight down feet first with a drill-like corkscrew motion. A multi-hit dive kick that functions sorta like Corrin's. It drags enemies down with him, functioning like a soft spike if he doesn't land with it. Works best when used situationally, as a landing mix-up to trip up overly zealous juggle attempts, or as a kamikaze move off stage. Waluigi's grab game starts off pretty simple, with more or less typical grabs, though he does stumble a little if he misses, so that's amusing at least. But his pummel forgoes the usual headbutts or knee jabs, because instead he does that two-fingered eye poke thing made famous by the Three Stooges. It's slower than most pummels, but also deals more damage than most. Having both your eyes poked at the same time hurts. Then his forward throw punts the opponent forward, good for positioning, but that's it. His back throw has him lob his enemy, take out his tennis racket, and swat them away, with enough knockback to kill it like 170, but it's not his main way of closing stocks off a grab. His up throw has him fling the opponent upward with both hands like how some people shoot free throws. It doesn't combo or KO, so it's just kinda there. But his down throw kicks the enemy's feet out from under them, forcing them to trip on the spot. Dealing weak damage but leaving the opponent flat on their aft ends, it can lead into combo or kill setups if you correctly guess their get-up option. And what's a trickster figure without a few good taunts? Like one where Waluigi points and laughs at whatever is going on at the moment, one where he says "loser" and makes an L sign on his forehead for emphasis, and one where he twirls in place, takes out a rose from somewhere on his person, and strikes a finishing pose like the suave dancer he wishes he was. Oh, and each of these taunts would have a small chance of something going wrong. His laugh might turn into a coughing fit, he might make the L sign backwards and only notice halfway through, and he might get dizzy during the spin and botch the pose at the end. Now let's get to the interesting part, because Waluigi's specials are where you really get to bend the rules. Alright, quick, what's one way you can think of that let you cheat the usual conventions of a Smash match? How about sneaking in your own items? A staple of every Mario Kart game, driving over an item box nets you a random item to interfere with the other drivers. It seems Waluigi found a way to smuggle a few into Smash. Don't worry, it's not as broken as it sounds. On use, Waluigi reaches behind his back and pulls an item box out of hammer space. Pressing A while he's holding the box throws it, or you can press B again to break it in your hand and immediately pick up whatever was in it. The item contained within is chosen randomly, with a little roulette icon next to Waluigi's heads-up display that shows the item that'll appear in the next box you break. Yeah, you can actually tell ahead of time what's going to be in the next one you pull out. Guess you could say he peeks at what's inside ahead of time. So what could be in these things? One of these 6 items. A mini hammer like the ones thrown by Hammer Bros. When Waluigi tosses it himself, it travels in an arc and passes through platforms but not stage surfaces. A purple shell that may or may not be a green shell painted over. It functions like a green shell as well at first, until it hits someone, as its knockback is slightly weaker but sends opponents backward in the direction it came from, usually back toward you for a potential follow-up. A rotten mushroom based on the design from Super Mario Maker 2, which travels along the ground at moderate speed, this time without actively seeking people out, and poisoning whoever touches it or picks it up, dealing damage over time. Another recolored item, this time a purple knockoff Wabomb. Unlike the regular version, this one never gets up and moves on its own, and while it's not nearly as big or strong when it blows up because that'd be unbalanced, it does create 3 smaller explosions in quick succession, making it easier to hit with and more likely to poke shields. An eggplant, the rarest available item. Picking it up actually lets you eat it and heal yourself, but the animation for doing so is slowed down, making you more vulnerable to getting hit while you chow down. And a banana peel, which works just like it usually does. Unusual even by B-button standards, item boxes give Waluigi a Swiss Army knife of options for controlling the stage and throwing wrenches in his opponent's plans. But since there's next to no consistency with what you get, even though you know what'll be in the next box, and there's a cooldown after you pull out a box before another becomes available, and you can't have more than one out at a time, and you can't get the same item twice in a row, you basically have to take whatever you get and roll with it. Adaptability is key. Whew, well, that was wild. This next one's a little more restrained, but still pretty sneaky. Based on Waluigi's signature ability in the baseball spin-offs, the Lyreball takes a few different forms across the two games, but all are built around the idea of making the baseball harder to hit or harder to catch, or making it dangerous to catch. Our version is based most closely on the Star Swing from Mario Superstar Baseball, with some adjustments made. On use, Waluigi takes out a bat and ball and hits a pop fly directly ahead. Think a little higher and further than Belmont axe height with about 2/3 of the speed. If someone runs into the ball normally, they just take a weak hit. But once the ball is on its way down, it reveals its true nature and transforms into a whiskered eggplant with a different design than the eggplant item you can get from the boxes. Anyone who gets hit by this thing not only takes more damage, they also get briefly stunned as if Pac-Man's bell hit them, leaving them wide open for a follow-up. You can also adjust the angle the ball/eggplant is hit at by pressing directions during the swing, but only to a minor extent. While catching someone with the eggplant is nice and all, Lyreball's real utility is in the indirect pressure it lets you create. By aiming it at certain parts of the stage, you can use the threat of the eggplant to scare opponents away from being where to land. Basically, it works for applying stage control and disrupting attempts to camp you out, while also doubling as a dangerous trap if you get a huge read with it. Alright, Waluigi's Up special is next. Have you been thinking, hey, I bet someone that tall with typical Mario Universe powers would create a lot of wind if he spun in place? No? Well, too bad. Waluigi's had several moves in different spin-offs where he creates whirlwinds for various purposes. Why not here as well? For our version, Waluigi pirouettes in place rapidly, leaning his top half over at a diagonal angle. After just a couple spins, a cyclone of sickly pale violet wind surrounds him and lifts him up and away in a boomerang pattern? Yeah, this one's less straightforward than similar spinning recovery moves, taking a trajectory sorta like a tilted version of the symbol on Waluigi's hat. Traveling at such weird angles makes this move trickier to intercept than typical recoveries, and you can even alter its angles at the start by holding in various directions. Sometimes it's the strangest moves that end up the most useful. An unconventional yet pretty solid recovery tool, Crooked Cyclone covers good distance before it peters out, and it's actually quite flexible once you get the hang of how it moves. It also deals damage to anyone who gets too close, obviously. One hit as the wind forms around Waluigi, and a second hit once he starts moving. That said, the damage and knockback are just okay, mainly there to help screw up edgeguard attempts, so it's not something you really want to rely on to kill with or punish out a shield. And you also go into freefall afterward, but you do maintain some of the lateral momentum you had, so maybe that can get you the extra distance you need? But wait, isn't there a Mario spin-off series we haven't tapped into yet? What if I told you there's one more thing we can do to really put this moveset shenanigans over the top? I bet you're wondering, what'll happen next? Literally. The infamous green question mark spaces in Mario Party lead to all kinds of wacky board events depending on which space you landed on, and Smash could put its own spin on that. Using this move would have Waluigi toss a shrunken down happening space onto the ground nearby, expanding to its usual size and turning on a few seconds afterward, complete with a question mark hologram to make it easier to tell it's there. Once it's fully set, the first fighter to step on the happening activates it, causing one of many potential effects to happen. You might gain a temporary buff to speed or damage dealt, a small heal, a rare negative effect like getting poisoned, or even something weird like swapping places with another fighter. But that pales in comparison to what happens most often, a unique effect specific to each stage that alters the layout in some way. For example, Battlefield might lose one of its side platforms for around 15 seconds, Final Destination might gain a platform for a little while, Yoshi's Island has support ghosts pop up on both sides simultaneously, Brinstar breaks all the destructible parts of the stage immediately, Albert has the cannon open fire on the spot, and that's just scratching the surface. While it sounds like a gimmicky thing for casual play, and it kind of is, happenings would have some competitive use as well. If you're falling behind, you can try and force your opponent out of their comfort zone zone or gain some kind of temporary upside in hopes of turning the tides. Though it's still risky since it takes a while for the space to activate, and if you lose stage control before then, your opponents could get the chance to use it instead. Happening spaces can also be destroyed if they take enough damage, vanish on their own if left unused for too long, and you can only have one in play at a time, and there's a cooldown after one gets used / destroyed / neglected until it disappears. And some stage effects wouldn't be available if you're playing with hazards off, mainly the crazier ones that involve stage hazards. It'd need to be handled very carefully so this move wouldn't single-handedly get some stages banned. All that's left now is Waluigi's final smash. And what better way to end this than with a real show-stopping number? Waluigi's appearance in Dance Dance Revolution Mario Mix is the only time he's been a major antagonist so far, and his signature song from that is the perfect inspiration for our grand finale. Wielding the power of a smash ball, Waluigi strikes a pose with rose in hand as the lights go out, even if you're fighting outdoors, save for a trio of spotlights aimed directly on him. Right on cue, he breaks into a briskly paced, surprisingly well choreographed tango that the player can direct left and right, with each movement and gesture summoning a chorus of falling wah-bombs, dropping down and blowing up anyone nearby. Then Waluigi finishes with a twirl and mugs for the camera, summoning a final round of bombs that completely surround him and anyone in range for a literally explosive finish. As the lights go back on, the dust settles to show Waluigi's face comically covered in soot. He scowls, shakes it off, and the fight continues on. This is what Waluigi could be like in Smash. A dubious doppelganger dead set on attaining fame and fortune through any means possible. While his methods are questionable at best, his willingness to bend the rules at every turn and the sheer ingenuity he occasionally displays, and his short temper when it inevitably doesn't work out, make him memorable and entertaining despite his lack of starring roles. An expert at fighting underhanded, Waluigi is at his best when sabotaging his opponent's game plans through stage control and forcing them to play by his terms. His many traps and setups allow him to rack up damage and close out stocks without breaking a sweat if his player keeps outthinking their opponents and pulling off mind games. And his many items and happening events can provide an ace in a hole for running away with a lead, sealing a win late in the game, or stealing a win by turning a disadvantage around. However, Waluigi's own game plan is rather reliant on landing his setups and otherwise predicting his opponent's actions, which gets tough if his player is the one getting mind-gamed. His strongest tools are reliant on RNG breaking the right way and giving him the item or event he wants, and if he gets something else, then he has to work with it and hope it's enough. And all of his tricks and traps rely on having the breathing room to prep them, something he might find difficult against sustained pressure or constant projectiles. In some matchups, he'd need to win neutral first just to get anything going. So, Waluigi superfans, what do you think? Does this concept capture the essence of who he is any better than the other movesets you've come across? I wanted his fighting style to encourage thinking the way he does and feel like an actual cohesive moveset, instead of just a bunch of references to Mario spin-offs stitched together. Took a lot of brainstorming to get it feeling right, especially his specials. While I'm honestly not very confident in Waluigi's chances right now, assist trophies in general seem like they're in a rough spot for DLC unless proven otherwise, things could still break his way in the long run. Maybe the next Smash game that'll inevitably happen at some point will be the one that finally lets him join the fight, on his own merits, not just because of the memes. Which is hard to pull apart from the rest of his reputation since Smash memes are such a double-edged sword. While they can be pretty funny, they can also create misconceptions and stir up some pretty toxic sentiments. What are your thoughts on this whole phenomenon? Do you think Smash memes are good, bad, something in between? Have your thoughts on Waluigi himself changed because of all the memes surrounding him? Special thanks to these people here for helping make this video happen. Shout out to my patrons in particular for their continued support despite all the ups and downs we've been through lately. So, see you next time. Same Waluigi time, same Waluigi channel. Wait a minute, who wrote this?